What's up, beautiful world? This is TNA, top-notch audio, and welcome to another episode of r/malicious compliance. Our first story will be security regulations you wrote apply to you too, followed by change our expenditure accounts. The food bank will have a feast. And finally, you want me to pour cold water to melt the ice? If this is your first time listening, remember to hit that subscribe button on the bottom right-hand corner. If this is not your first time, welcome back. Enjoy the stories of r/malicious compliance. And this story is posted by u/SpongeBob_NoPants. Security regulations you wrote apply to you too. This was my first security gig right out of the military. Good starter job for security work. It was access control at a medium-sized aircraft engine factory. A friend of mine worked HR there, but he also held the title as head of security, so he offered me a job and I accepted. One of the biggest rules were ID checks. Apparently, a few years prior, a couple of people had gotten in with photocopied IDs. So after that, we had to physically check the ID was plastic. We did this by touching it. Now, do access control enough and you start to memorize people. We didn't check those IDs by touching them because we knew them, and if they had been fired, we would have gotten a notice. Well, that angered the head of HR, so she set some new rules. She wasn't the head of security, but security fell under HR, so she kind of was. All IDs must be checked, no exceptions. No non-employee is allowed through the gate without a notice signed by her or the head of security, and has to be submitted 12 hours prior to their entry, like for people scheduled for interviews. Visitor badges assigned without prior approval can only be done for normal delivers like the post office or FedEx. Anyone who violates it will be reported by security to HR for a security violation. That was fine and dandy. We really didn't care. Everything went smooth for about a month until that one day. Here she comes to the gate, but she isn't driving, her husband is. It is raining, and I mean flood level raining. I asked her husband for his ID and he says he didn't have one. She seen where this was going and tried to stop me. He was only there to take her in because it was raining and she didn't want to walk from her car to the building and ruin her outfit. That's when I threw the rules back to her. I didn't have a security notice for him, so I couldn't assign a badge and couldn't let him in. She tried but it's only 100 yards, which again, I reminded her of the rule she set down. She actually said, "Well, I'm your boss." Technically she wasn't. "We are going in anyways," which I replied again, her rule that any breaches of policy must be reported as a security violation. So there she is, dressed to the nines, forced to walk without a jacket to the building, 100 yards in the rain to get to her office. Why didn't we lend her a security rain jacket, you ask? Because she said there wasn't enough money in the security budget to buy them. Later that day, she modified the rules that on drop-offs, that security has full discretion to allow someone entry for that purpose. We also got our rain jackets 2 weeks later, and she never bothered security again. And this story is posted by u/ABXWAK. Change our expenditure accounts. The food bank will have a feast. This happened about 10 years ago when I worked for a company doing community nursing. We were provided with company cars and a prepaid card for expenditure, fuel, and food. The card had a limit of 400 euros per week, the card resetting to the 400 limit every Monday morning. Despite the 400 euros limit, the usual amount any of us spent each week was around 150 to 200 euros, depending upon travel. The usual was to get a full tank once a week, which was around 55 to 60 euros, and the rest was coffee and lunch. Enter Chad. He was a financial officer and had some pretty unique ideas about changing the finances of the company. One of the ideas he instituted was a change to our prepaid cards. He dropped the limit to 50 euros a day, with the card resetting every day. As you can understand, this was a problem, especially if you consider that a full tank costed 55 euros minimum. If you used the card for fuel, then the rest was paid out of pocket. We couldn't be reimbursed for the money because you have a company card, learn to use it more efficiently. Initially, most coworkers were spending 30 euros on fuel and refueled 2 or 3 times a week, but not me. While my malicious compliance tendencies were natural, during my Navy service we honed to perfection by a couple of master chiefs. So, enter malicious compliance. I decided to spend each day 20 euros for fuel, some days less, pay for my own coffee out of pocket and spend the rest at lunch. I used to patron a grill and barbecue place that had a catering side. They also volunteered for a local food bank and kitchen. The owner had grew up dirt poor and liked to help. A lot of clients would buy something and add a little extra to an open tab for the food bank. Then the catering would go each Sunday and provide food for the homeless and the poor using the tab and funds from the owner. So I went there every day, got something to eat, and rested the amount until 50 euros would go to the tab. I started rising at least 90 euros a week for the food bank. I hit the limit every day, costing the company 250 euros a week from 150. Chad was furious. He was trying to save money and I was costing him more. He asked me to explain my expenses, food and fuel. He asked for receipts. I provided them. The receipt said food, nothing else. He finally said I should eat cheaper. I told him the company couldn't force not to eat whatever I wanted. After that meeting, a couple of coworkers saw me coming out smiling and inquired about it. I explained what I was doing, the smiles on their faces. Soon afterwards, 6 nurses spent all their expenses the same way. The aftermath. This went on for 2 months. Chad was livid because now he was losing even more money. The solution came unexpectedly. Unbeknownst to all of us, the owner, the company was a major contributor to the food bank. He knew about the restaurant helping out and had seen the richer buffets. He asked the owner of the restaurant about, and he said a few nurses had started coming, raising the tab, at that point 600 euros minimum. The owner put 2 and 2 together. I was called in for a meeting with the owner. I was anxious because I didn't know what it was about. When I got there, Chad was there also. During the meeting, Chad explained how he was losing money, but he couldn't do anything about it. I explained what our grievance was and how we took advantage of it. Chad replied we shouldn't game the system for something so stupid as a food bank. The owner stopped the meeting right there. He reinstated the old system for expenditure. He reprimanded both of us for the whole mess, me a bit less, and informed me that if I make a donation for the food bank to notify him and he will match it. The final result was getting our old system back, which we didn't abuse, a weekly donation to the food bank, and a major Easter Sunday barbecue for the food bank sponsored by the company. Chad lasted only another 3 months because his penny-saving ways dropped the quality of care we could provide. I stayed with the company until it was sold to new owners who were more like Chad, but that's a story for another subreddit. And this next story is posted by u/RamboRobertsons20. You want me to pour cold water to melt the ice? Background. When I was 16, while working as a bagger in a grocery store, we got a new manager. We would call her Eliza. Eliza had a very I'm right, you're wrong attitude. She didn't care if she was in the wrong, but you better do what she told you until she changed her mind. If you spoke out against her, you would end up on her spit list and she would do her best to get you fired. Story. Generally, the bagger is the lowest position in a store. We collect carts from the lot, put away items, stock, clean, bag, and somehow we are always at fault. Cue Eliza. I had an early shift, clocked in, started morning duties, and I heard on the loudspeaker, OP, please come up to aisle 6, frozen aisle, seafood. Edit. This is an oval-shaped, open-air freezer at the end of the aisle. 6 compartments, about 20 feet long in total. 1 compartment on each end, 2 in between on each side. About 2 feet deep under the aluminum panels with fans facing out from the center. Drainage in the bottom. Freezing air blows out vents onto the merchandise above. Drainage compartments eventually clog with ice over time. I came in and Eliza gives me a smile and asked me to grab a bucket and scrub brush. I was going to pull out the bottom aluminum floor panels at the bottom of the freezer and melt the ice that accumulates around the fans. It should take no longer than 30 minutes, she said. Make sure you use cold water since we don't want the temperature sensors to go off. Anything over 42 degrees Fahrenheit will set them off and corporate will call. I say, let me make sure I have this right. You would like me to fill the bucket with cold water and pour it on the ice in the freezer while the freezer is at 19 degrees Fahrenheit. Stares at me like I'm stupid. I inform her it isn't going to work. The water will freeze and just create a mound of ice. I suggest using hot or practically boiling water while watching the temperature. Eliza gives me a firm no and the threat of writing me up if I disobey. The start of MC begins. I've already figured that no matter what I do, I'm likely to be in trouble. To get the water, I had to fill it in the meat department sink. The meat manager asked what I was up to, and I told the story with all the details. Meat manager is scratching his head, and he heads over to call Eliza. She confirms, and I hear a bit of arguing. Meat manager comes back, gives me a smile, and says to do as I was told. He'd back me up. So, for the next hour, I must have put about 200 gallons of cold water onto the freezer fan. I switched from a 2-gallon bucket to a 5-gallon. I stopped and moved to the next fan each time the compartment was to the brim with ice. I got 4 compartments done before she came to check on me. Instant rage. Eliza went from white to red real quick. It was also the first time I've heard a manager cuss. What the duck is this? How the duck could you screw up something so simple? Said Eliza. I said, I did exactly what you told me to. I took buckets of cold water and poured them on the ice around the fans. Right as she said she was going to write me up, the meat manager came over after hearing her cussing. The meat manager saw the ice-filled compartments and mentioned that I should have used hot water. This sent Eliza over the edge. Up to my office now. You're being written up. The meat manager did what he said he'd do. He stuck up for me. Meat manager mentioned that he double-checked with her what she wanted me to do, and I was complying with her instructions. She was silent for a moment, and it was like her head was going to pop off. She just took a deep breath and muttered out, "Fix it," and walked away. The meat manager gave me an extended industrial hose hooked up to the hot water. The water in meat department can get up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit to kill bacteria. The ice was gone in 15 minutes, and since apparently the freezer temperature measured as a whole, it never went above 34 degrees Fahrenheit. Eliza avoided me for over a week afterward. I knew I was on her spit list, and for the next 8 months, she tried to write me up for the most pitiful reasons. I eventually was given a written warning for leaving 9 minutes early with approval from the front-end manager that was friends with Eliza. At that point, I knew I would get fired for crap eventually, and I quit without my 2 weeks. Those were 3 great stories. To hear the best stories of the week, click on the video in the top left-hand corner. To hear more Reddit stories all related to what you just heard, click on the video in the top right-hand corner. If you have not already done so, click on the subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner. Once again, this is TNA, Top Notch Audio. Thank you for listening and have yourself a great day.